I met up with my girlfriend in Kunming, and the circumstances were somewhat improvised and unexpected, not worth telling the whole story. But when I met up with her, we needed to use the internet to try to buy airplane tickets, to look at different options. We ended up taking the bus from Kunming to Dehong together, which is beautiful. I don't regret that at all. Now that I know how great that bus trip is, I'd much rather do the bus than do the airplane. But anyway, when we were there, I thought, oh, great, no problem. We'll just go around to some of the Chinese internet cafes. And I knew several in the neighborhood, even though I'd never used them. Now, I have memories from fully 10 years ago, like 2007, 2008, of how the internet and internet censorship used to work in China. Now, it used to be at that time, if you were at a public internet cafe, as I was back then, use a public internet cafe, and you started typing in a word that was politically sensitive at that time, I'm not going to give examples, you could have the computer shut down and log you out in front of you while you were typing the email. So your email wouldn't get set. You would be signed out of the computer while you were logged in typing. That was the kind of government control they had over the internet at that time, 10 years ago. Now, what I didn't know, I just found this out as a surprise, walking around Kunming with my girlfriend. We try, because, fine, you understand that, you accept that, you move on. Those are the rules you play by when you use the internet in China, when you use the public internet terminal in China. But control in Kunming had been raised a significant level in a significant way. This last time when I was in Kunming with my girlfriend, we could not use a public internet cafe anywhere because all of them required Chinese government ID. They needed your citizen's ID card. And they would sign you in. They would beep in the card. They would scan the card. And then everything you did sitting at that computer wasn't just monitored and controlled by the government. It was linked to your name. It was linked to your ID card. Right? So that's a significant next step in government monitoring and control. And I asked them, but what about foreigners? What about people like me who want to use the internet? And it doesn't work. You need to have a Chinese friend basically log in on your account. You need to come with somebody who's a Chinese citizen and has this standard piece of ID that pretty much everyone in China has. Otherwise, you cannot use a public internet terminal. So, wow, these things change. Just now, I was live streaming, and I started talking to a guy who just signed up for the Navy. He just went through basic training for the Navy, the U.S. Navy, the American Navy. And so I was interested to talk to him. I've talked to him before. So he's a vegan. He's just been through basic training and dealt with the dietary requirements and polishing leather shoes with a horsehair brush. They make him wear, leather boots and this kind of thing. So interesting guy, interesting stuff to talk about. So I'm trying to talk with him via live stream from a university campus in China. And it's a university campus right in a contested border area. I mean, I appreciate the level of public security we've got here, but this is an especially secure part of China for good reason, right next to the Myanmar border. And he's actually on a U.S. Army base. And suddenly, the quality of the connection deteriorates. We had to reboot and restart several times to get live streaming again. Now, that may be. I have someone asking in the audience. That could be just a coincidence. Could be. But the internet here is very actively monitored. It's not something passive. It's not a system that runs itself. There are people whose full-time job is to sit and watch what's happening on the internet and interact with it as censors or as government regulators all the time. And you see that. So I have a lot of experience using Skype here in China, making Skype calls within China, making Skype calls to the United States or what have you. And one of my friends, who definitely is a person of interest, she definitely is watched by the Chinese government much more than I am. When I was trying to talk to her on Skype, Skype was behaving very, very strangely. And Skype also insisted on closing down and restarting before we make the call. A lot of really, really weird behavior out of Skype. And among other funny things, Skype wouldn't let me send her a photo. In the chat, you can send a still photo. I was just trying to send a photo, actually, of strawberries. I've been buying a lot of strawberries here lately. You might have seen that post on my Twitter. So, it's funny. In all kinds of little ways, you get these reminders. And there are posters up saying it everywhere. If you go to an internet cafe here, there's a poster up with a cartoon of the police saying, the police are always watching you, this kind of thing. Back 10 years ago, it used to be when you logged into the computer, when you started up public computer, there was a reminder on the screen. The Chinese police are watching everything you do, for your safety and for everyone's safety all the time. So it's not a secret. But, it certainly makes you question the presumed contrast between Chinese culture on this and American culture. We now have, a new set of revelations about the extent from WikiLeaks just this week. Yet more news about the extent to which the American internet is monitored and recorded and indeed controlled by the U.S. government. And, the ways in which those powers are and are not controlled by democratic government's oversight. So there are hard questions to be asked in every country all around the world. I have to say, my concerns, what I want to see legislation on, has much less to do with privacy, has much more to do with who can and cannot access those archives when the information is needed. So if my brother disappears, can I get the data to try to track him down? Let's say my brother's a normal person. If my sister is murdered, under what circumstances can the police get that data? Can people get that data? Because once you know that the data exists, once you know that the government has an archive of everything your brother or your sister said to anyone and everything that people said to them, then you have to ethically justify why is it that we're pretending we don't have that data when it really could help someone, when it really could have consequences, whether that's with a murder investigation or a missing persons case or anything you want to say. What's the point of having a government that wants to pretend that data doesn't exist, and in reality, an agency like the CIA has it and can use it, but your local police cannot, and maybe you cannot? What if you, for some legitimate reason, want to access that kind of data? And you know it exists. These are, I think, very, very meaningful and important questions. And we also get questions about verifiability. So we had a court case in Canada recently, which I randomly read some articles about. It was interesting to me. It's not worth mentioning why. I guess it was interesting for human rights reasons. But we had a court case in Canada where the judge was misled by a fake Twitter account. It wasn't a major part of the court case, but someone made a joke Twitter account pretending to be the other person in the case. And this judge thought that the comments on that Twitter account really were the man in court. And so it was quite interesting. And as I recall, what the Canadian court system did was that they actually had to issue an amended judgment. They didn't invalidate the ruling, but the judge went back and changed his ruling. Interesting. Now, look, two very obvious problems here. If you have an internet that is managed and monitored by the CIA, by the government of China, by numerous other agencies, by the NSA in the United States is the big one, really, National Security Agency. Well, how can a judge verify, is this really the person making this comment? And conversely, can we ever verify whether or not the government themselves are impersonating someone? If the government wants to put me in prison, one of the easiest ways they could do so would be sending emails that are apparently sent by me, but not actually. Their power to impersonate you by using your accounts, whether it's your Twitter account or your email account or even your credit card, your banking account, that is now unchecked and unlimited. So verification of identity and the ability of the government to even scrutinize itself, to hold itself accountable in cases of identity theft, of perversion of justice, of misrepresenting someone's conduct. Those are major, major issues that didn't exist in the pre-digital era and that we have absolutely no legislation to handle. And I think they're much more important, much more pressing, and call for much more specific legislation than the blanket concept of privacy, a concept that was really invented at a time when we were talking about the privacy of a handwritten letter sent in the mail. And the consequences for someone else reading that letter really cannot be compared to the consequences of someone having access to my financial records, my banking data, being able to falsify transactions that I've apparently made myself, accessing mapping data of where I am, at what time I was in a given location. And we really do we really do have instances of people being convicted for crimes because they were talking on their cell phone in the car while someone else was committing a crime, and we can prove they chose not to call the police when they could have, which is down to this very, very fine level of specificity. But as specific as that is it verifiable? How can you ever know whether or not those records were falsified, perhaps by a hacker, but much more likely by a government agency itself, or simply by one corrupt individual within the government? Those are my thoughts.